Axel Rudakubana didn't slip through the net.
Human instinct has gone out the window, and unfortunately, people, including kids, have died.
When people really do challenge the status quo, like the farmers in Ireland, the establishment response is furious and violent.
You swamp them with illegal immigrants, you raise taxes you said you never would, you hammer farmers who exist literally just to keep everyone fed and watered. I think it's amazing what democratically elected governments will do to their own people.
Our kind of extended beef with the Pope was not on my 2026 card, but there we go.
The Pope is like, nah, we can all peacefully coexist, not with the Ayatollah.
Hello and welcome to the Spike podcast. I'm Fraser Myers, Deputy Editor of Spiked. Thrilled to be joined in the studio, as ever, by Spike's editor, Tom Slater.
Hello.
And joining us down the line, one of our favourites, GB News' Patrick Christys. Patrick, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, guys. Cheers.
Cheers. And we have got plenty to discuss today. We will be talking about the Southport inquiry, the revolts in Ireland, and Trump's AI images of himself as Jesus and his little row with the Pope. But before we get on to all that, Tom, do you want to remind people about the Spike Summit?
Exactly. Here is your weekly reminder about the Spike Summit, our biggest event ever, taking place on Saturday, the 27th of June at the Emmanuel Centre in Westminster. You've already seen the speakers. Constantine Kissin is going to be there. Lionel Shriver is going to be there. Brendan O'Neill, Catherine Burblesing, Fraser Myers, all kinds of star names. So you've got to get your tickets right now. Go to spiked-online.com/events. And if you're a Spike supporter, you get very healthy discounts. So do make sure you take advantage of that.
spiked-online.com/events. So the report from the Southport inquiry, at least the first part of it, was released this week. Very long report, very scathing about a number of Britain's institutions. It laid a lot of blame on the parents and their moral failings, their failure to say what they knew to the authorities. But I think more significantly, it really laid into the police, Prevent, mental health services, just about every agency that Axel Rudakubana, the killer, had an interaction with, which was a long list. Tom, what's been your takeaway from this?
I think what's been clear since almost immediately after the horrific attacks was that Axel Rudakubana didn't slip through the net. He was caught in the net time and time again. He was caught in all kinds of different nets, whether that's mental health services, whether that's the police, whether that's the Prevent Counter-Extremism program, and yet he just sort of was lifted out of it time and time again. And what's laid out in the report is utterly damning about, first and foremost, just level of kind of incompetence, buck passing. It describes a kind of merry-go-round of shirking responsibility for making sure that this monster wasn't allowed to commit his depraved attack. And also something that fed into that was a level of political correctness. I mean, one of the most shocking details from the report being that the deputy head teacher of the Acorn School, which Rudakubana was sent to after he was excluded, having carried a knife to school 10 times in his previous high school, tried to raise in his mental health plan that he was acting in quite a sinister fashion, obviously referencing his fascination and history with knives, and was accused by the local mental health lead of racially stereotyping him as a black boy with a knife. Similarly, the treatment of his autism spectrum disorder diagnosis seems to have fed into the remarkably light touch that the police gave him. The fact that when he was caught on a bus with a knife, which he handed over to the police and then openly admitted he wanted to kill someone, he was essentially just taken home. And they told his parents to hide the knives. And part of the write-up of that report was referring to his autism. And as the judge laid out, if anything, given the particular character of his mental health, that should have been more of a warning sign, the fact that, you know, that it could have fed into his behaviour rather than something that kind of exonerated him. So it's a story that we've seen time and time again, a kind of mixture of incompetence, and also these kinds of, how that's shaped by a culture of political correctness, and also an approach to safeguarding which seems to mainly be preoccupied with almost the well-being of the potential killer or the potential problem rather than the people around him. So utterly damning, but a lot of it is stuff that we already knew.
Yeah, and Patrick, I mean, this is one of the worst crimes of, in living memory, and yet it was entirely preventable. That's the thing that comes out from this report.
100%. So the head teacher of the school he was at after he'd been expelled for bringing a knife into his previous school said, look, this guy's basically a psychopath. As you've said, Tom, there, she was told, well, don't stereotype a black boy. And this is time and time again. The Nottingham triple killer, Valdo Calacane, was not sectioned literally just because he was black. Like a few weeks before he committed the triple killing, he tried to get into a woman's home. She does jump off her balcony. She broken her back, and they didn't section him because there were too many black men in mental health units. The Manchester Arena bombing as well, a security guard there didn't stop him, even though he had a rucksack on that, as we all know now, was packed with explosives, because he didn't want to be called a racist, stopping a kind of Muslim-looking guy with a rucksack. So it's time and time again. Obviously, the authorities are to blame here. However, Fraser, I'm keen to get your view on this, because you kind of slightly brushed over the role of the parents here. Now, the parents, the dad specifically, intercepted a machete that was ordered via Amazon to the home, then hid it. And then on the morning of the attack, they realised Axel had gone missing. They found an empty knife wrapper they'd hidden in the washing machine. The mum went back to bed. The dad prayed he'd gone for a walk, even though a week before he stopped his son getting in a taxi with a knife and going to commit another crime. And then they knew about his poison. So they knew he was making poison in his bedroom, and they didn't monitor his internet searches, despite the fact that they'd been told to. And as it turned out, he'd been Googling things like the Al-Qaeda training manual. So I do really think that a lot of blame there has to lie on the parents as well. Like the final backstop, when all the authorities have failed, like the police, mental health, prevent, all of that, which did fail. They did fail. But when all of that is said and done, your final backstop has to be your parents. And they did gain asylum from Rwanda in 2002, I think it was. There are question marks, really, aren't there, really, about whether or not they should be sent home. And also, Keir Starmer's got off very lightly in this. So Keir Starmer spent 19 seconds in Southport laying a wreath at the time. And then he flew back, I think it was, to Downing Street and attended a garden party that night. Right? Like, that is pretty poor by anyone's standards, really. So, it's losers all round, isn't it? And ultimately, the problem here is that children didn't have to die or be hurt. And I don't buy this lessons learned thing. I don't know if we are going to learn any lessons from this.
Yeah, and I agree. The role of the parents is absolutely shocking. And there were attempts to charge them, or at least to charge Alphonse, Axel's father, because of simply the negligence that he displayed, and actually getting in the way of the investigation. It seems to me that this inquiry, should lead to that being relooked at, because there's so much evidence that he essentially was a barrier to this. I mean, I thought it was important to raise the state agencies first, just because, again, like, we can blame parents, and parents should be held responsible. But when parents, go wayward, when they fail, you think that's when the I'd almost say it the other way around. That's when the state has to step in, and it didn't, and it completely failed on that sense. What would have happened had Alphonse Rudakubana said, "Look, my son is hoarding knives, etc., etc." Because how many times was he caught doing those things already?
Yeah, no, and that was one of the things in the report, which lays out the kind of timeline of all of this in really stark detail. The fact, as you say, Patrick, that a week prior to the Southport massacre, he tried to get in that cab to go to his old high school to kill people.
That old high school, the special kind of college that he went to, the teachers there were so afraid of him that they requested a police escort when they had to go and do home visits, because he had an attendance record of 1%. So they'd go and do home visits. They had to request a police escort. So look, it is a complete failure. I mean, the idea that the police, did not think. I mean, if you had to draw a potential multiple killing psychopath, like just on paper, it would have been Axel Rudakubana. And it is terrifying for everyone that this was not prevented, right? And, it's a big problem.
And on the day of it as well, the fact that his mother had found the packaging shortly after he'd left the house. The last time he had left the house was to go and attack people. He'd become such a kind of shut-in that was the only reason that he would ever leave his front door. Yeah. And yet they thought, oh, I guess he's gone for a walk. How you can wrap your head around that thought process is almost impossible. And then also the fact that he admitted to bringing a knife to school 10 times to use it, and explicitly said, I want to kill people. I mean, he told Childline, when he was a young teenager, that he wanted to kill people. you would have thought that once was enough to spark some kind of serious intervention.
The boy that he beat up with a hockey stick as well. There was that story. That boy's lucky to be alive, frankly.
Yeah, he had a knife on him during that as well. It wasn't just it's been written up as the hockey stick attack, but he was clearly intending to stab him to death as well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the racism allegations, or the fear of racially profiling isn't the whole story here, but it is obviously a thread between all the cases that Patrick's been talking about. And you do think, when you take in all of the cases that we've already discussed, when you take in the grooming gangs, when you take in all kinds of horrific state failures that have taken place over the course of the past couple of decades, how powerful is the accusation of racism that it's almost preferable to allow someone that's obviously dangerous to walk free? It's almost preferable to allow working class and poor girls to continue to be raped on an industrial scale. It's almost preferable to let someone through, into a packed arena wearing a very suspicious backpack. And of course, we understand the potency of that message, but also in terms of that label. But surely there also needs to be a level of accountability for just the cowardice of so many different public authorities now. Is it really that much worse to allow that, to get that name thrown at you? Is it being afraid of being called names?
It's just this horrific combination, Patrick, between cowardice or wokeness or whatever that is driving people to think that it's the worst thing in the world to be accused of racism, and also just sheer incompetence as well. The two things go hand in hand, and they're lethal.
They go hand in hand, and I do think that people who have chosen that it would be worse to be called a racist than for girls to be raped, people to be blown up, or girls to be stabbed, do have some personal accountability. But we have to try to get to the bottom of why they thought that way. And that, for me, is the natural product of either critical race theory being taught in schools, or DEI speakers and emphasis in the workplace, especially the public sector. So if you bring in, people who tell you that a microaggression is racist, even though you don't really know what a microaggression is, sometimes in my life I've been aggressive and I've apologized for that. I don't really know what a microaggression is. Is that just pass ag? Is that like when I don't put a nappy in the bin and Emily's is that a microaggression? I don't know what it is, but if you're told that is racist, then it means that people's basic human instincts, such as, okay, that bloke at the Manchester Arena, for example, happened to be, Asian, right? But he was also a single man walking with a massive rucksack in an arena full of children, which is just pretty sus anyway. But because he's Asian, that security guard, I bet your bottom dollar at some point, the security team at that venue have done some kind of course on unconscious bias, right? And that's what's made him second guess. So his human instinct has gone out the window. And unfortunately, people, including kids, have died. And at what point do you say, and it's a really uncomfortable thing to say, but sometimes a bit of stereotyping is natural, right? It's a natural human instinct. You shouldn't walk around and judge everyone the same way. But for example, in Rotherham or Rochdale, right, where these grooming gangs happen, statistically speaking, you were more likely to be part of these grooming gangs if you were a Pakistani taxi driver or a kebab shop owner. So are you just going to ignore that? Are we just going to stop random people called Paul on the street and ask them if they're part of a grooming gang? No, it's intelligence led, isn't it? And I think this kind of wokery, frankly, has actually made us less safe. And we are seeing it time and time again.
And also you look at people like Axel Rudakubana or Valdo Calacane. I think the salient feature, if you're just going on looks, it's not that they're black, but they're really dead behind the eyes, and they look psychotic, I'm afraid to say.
When he left the house, he had this long hoodie on, he had a face mask on. I mean, it was so clear. I mean, as you were saying earlier, Patrick, if you had to kind of draw a picture of a sort of murderous, crazed young man, you'd draw Axel Rudakubana. I mean, that mugshot has gone around the world for a reason. And I think that's one thing, is that whether we're talking about wokeness or whatever it is that we want to call it, the way in which that kind of teaches people to ignore the evidence of their own eyes or to ignore their own instincts has really been quite depressing. And also, I think what's fascinating about all of these different agencies and processes and schemes, whether that be mental health services or Prevent or what have you, the way in which they all failed is also a kind of telling reminder that, particularly around the question of child safeguarding, over the course of the past few decades, you've got all of these schemes and checks and bureaucracies kind of build up in response to horrific scandals, whether that's sex abuse or killings in school or so on and so forth. And yet, how easily they just fail to protect people from even quite clearly dangerous individuals is a reminder that really the kind of human instinct and a kind of clearer sense of people, whether they're teachers or whether they're police officers, what have you, being emboldened to make the right choice at the right time is a far better corrective than all of the kind of Ponzi and kind of threadbare schemes you could possibly cook up in Whitehall. And yet and yet all of these teachers or various people working, social workers, what have you, have been kind of defanged to a certain extent by process, by training, and essentially told by one means or another actually not to follow their instincts. And so it's a chilling reminder that part of the reason that you fell through the net of all these agencies is because in some respects they are from the off kind of mitigating against acting in the right way when it's necessary.
Have you ever been this close to buying something online and then realised you couldn't be bothered to get up and find your card? You're in bed, it's late, and you've already added way too much to your cart anyway. Maybe you should just leave it until tomorrow. That's when you notice the purple Shop Pay button. One tap and you're done. No card hunting necessary. But what you might not realise is that little purple button is powered by Shopify. And Shopify isn't just making it easier to buy, it's making it ridiculously easy to start your own business too. In fact, Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Everything from massive brands like Mattel and Gymshark, all the way to people just getting started. You don't need to be a tech expert either. Shopify gives you hundreds of sleek, ready-to-go templates so you can build your brand exactly how you want, without the hassle of coding anything. Plus, you can run everything in one place. Inventory, payments, analytics. With Shopify, all of it is right at your fingertips. Better yet, Shopify's built-in marketing and email tools help you find your customers and keep them coming back time and again. And yeah, we've got to mention it again. That purple Shop Pay button. It's used by millions of businesses worldwide, and it's the reason Shopify has the best converting checkout rate on the planet. People trust it. So if you want fewer abandoned carts, head over to Shopify. Sign up for your £1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.co.uk/spiked. Go to shopify.co.uk/spiked. That's shopify.co.uk/spiked. So let's talk about Ireland. In recent weeks, there's been a massive wave of fuel protests. Truckers, farmers, basically anyone with a sort of transport-dependent job. They've been out there blockading various petrol stations, fuel terminals, even Ireland's only fuel refinery, basically demanding, lower prices. Prices obviously got up enormously since the Iran war. But I think it'd be wrong to just say that this is a product of geopolitics. Even before the Iran war in recent years, the price of petrol in Ireland, I think, trebled or quadrupled. Unfortunately, this is the story across Europe. But it's good to see people fighting back, Tom.
Yeah, exactly. And making a huge impact in such a short space of time. Don't get on the wrong side of people who operate heavy machinery is a lesson that various governments don't seem to learn. And it's inspiring. I mean, as you say, this isn't just about the Iran war. This is about the kind of build-up of eco policies, which have actually brought Irish farmers out to the streets before, on the issue of when they wanted to cull all those cattle for environmental reasons.
Kill 200,000 cattle.
Yeah, totally sensitive thing to do. But now on the question of fuel prices, which, and naturally the Irish government, like governments across the West, have been putting green virtue ahead of people's living standards. The carbon tax there is very much hated. And it's a part of a piece of a kind of West-wide revolt against greenism, against just the mismanagement of elites and the kind of the strange disregard that they now have for agriculture, sectors of the real economy. So you see these things crop up time and time again. The Gilets jaunes in 2018 and 2020 over green fuel taxes. If you talk about the farmers' revolt across Europe in relation to, again, emissions reduction schemes in the Netherlands and elsewhere. If you think about even in our own country, we've seen kind of upsurges in this in relation to farmers. The truckers' revolt, a little bit different, of course, but still there's a kind of common thread there, which is revolt from below, but one that also exists entirely separate to the left, which I think is a really interesting thing. This wasn't organised by trade unions. This wasn't organised by any left-wing party. This is something which has cropped up organically in and of itself. and if anything, is drawing the scorn of a lot of sections of the kind of liberal left establishment. It was interesting to see the Irish Justice Minister trot out the old canard that they were just kind of being manipulated by outside actors like Tommy Robinson. They weren't doing it of their own accord. You're starting to see some concessions, which is often part of the story as well. First comes the condemnation and sending in the riot police, and second comes the kind of grudging relief packages we've now seen announced. But it's fascinating that this is almost like a Western movement that is very much in conversation with the different parts of it all at the same time, using the same tactics, same kind of symbols, same slogans in some cases. And it's just hit Ireland in a big way. So long may it continue.
It has really, really rocked the Irish establishment. I mean, they did actually even threaten to send the army on some of the protesters. There was a no confidence vote in the Irish Parliament. The government only very narrowly won. So it's obviously having an impact even within the hallowed halls of the establishment parties. They're having to take their cue from the streets. Patrick, what have you made of it?
I think it's amazing what democratically elected governments will do to their own people, isn't it? You swamp them with illegal immigrants, you raise taxes you said you never would, you hammer farmers who exist literally just to keep everyone fed and watered, then you rope the tanks in when they protest about net zero, which they didn't vote for. The Irish government has been especially mental when it comes to gender, which, can I just say, in largely Catholic Ireland is quite a break. I mean, there's probably almost not a better example in the world of an elite that is as disassociated from the people as that kind of like LGBT core that rule things in the Republic of Ireland and the people of rural Ireland, right? It's absolutely nuts. They're mental on thought crimes. They wanted to make it a crime that even if you just had something on your phone, like if I sent you a meme, which would be like funny, but someone could think that was a hateful crime, they would arrest me and you for that. They wanted to bring that in. They weren't quite successful. But so, the thing is, I've got an idea with this, right? So if the farmers wanted to be successful with their protest, what they should have done was paint a Palestine flag on front of their tractor, hired a non-binary transsexual illegal immigrant to drive the tractor, and they would currently be in charge of Dublin.
Yeah, and it is interesting how, there are lots of protest movement. As you say, there are so many approved of protest movements that are given, we know that the police tread lightly on, where they don't come in swinging with the truncheons. There are protests in favor of government policy. I'm thinking of the Extinction Rebellion. It's basically a protest for, the Theresa May, Le Feu of the world, but poses as rebellious. But when people really do challenge the status quo, like the farmers in Ireland or Gilets Jaunes, and all the examples you've given, the establishment response is furious and violent, and it's like a tick. They can't help but call them far right. Before people, they haven't even strayed off the topic of fuel, and already they're accused of having ulterior motives.
We did see this, throughout Brexit and stuff, but also like Ed Davey does this a lot now. There's foreign influence. So the idea that Mick from County Clare or whatever has woken up one day and got in touch with the Chinese and the Russians about how he should feel that day, when actually his accountant, who is probably like his cousin, right, has just told him that basically he's fucked. Yeah. And he's gone, you know what, I am going to protest about it, because if I don't protest about it, I go out of business and Bill Gates buys my farm, right? So he's going to protest, and then they look at it and they go, well, he's a Russian.
I remember there was like a Glaswegian, I think security guard who was accused of being a Russian bot, and it was just because he tweeted at weird times of night and in bad English, and obviously took the pro-Brexit line or whatever.
All the characteristics. It is amazing, and you could tell it shows the kind of brittleness of the establishment. I think they're not. The authoritarianism comes not from a place of strength, but from a place of brittleness. I think they know that they're on the back foot. They know that they can't command the support of much of the public. They certainly can't command the support of the streets at points like this. And to go back to that, it's really fascinating that this whole, over the past 10 years, really, this kind of rise of what you could kind of call street populism has really gone hand in hand with the democratic ballot box populist revolts as well. And it's a part and parcel of the sense that, particularly working class people, lower middle class people, people who certainly don't support the kind of values of the establishment, but also are on the receiving end of the immiseration of green virtue signaling or what have you, are asserting themselves, and in ways that people don't expect them to, in ways that are completely outside the structures of the organised left, in ways that are quite surprising. Protest in particular, having long been the preserve of the sort of comfortably off classes, it's kind of a day out. It's kind of akin to going to Glastonbury or something like that. It's an opportunity to just gather together and get a warm feeling for being on the right side of history, whatever.
Have a little dance in Trafalgar Square with the sacked rice king.
Put your gimp suit on and have a nice time. This is a kind of reclaiming of that, actually, by, for lack of a better phrase, ordinary people.
I think that various governments are shockingly behind the times on this, because time and time again, they seem to be like 5 or 6 years behind the fact that everyone now is on social media, and channels, I'm not just saying this for a plug, by the way, but channels like GB News exist and podcasts like yours exist now and get massive viewers, right? And so we can see the hypocrisy when you roll the tanks in for a load of farmers who are going to go broke and their kids are going to starve, right? But you don't do anything when someone like, draped a Palestine flag above your local embassy, or does something mental. People can see the hypocrisy, and these governments don't seem to understand that everything is filmed now. Like in London the other day on Friday, pro-Palestine activists charged at serving military personnel in uniform on their way into the Ministry of Defence. Right? We can all see that. There was no police with riot shields, whereas several other times, like, for example, what's going on in Epsom. Now, I don't know exactly what's going on there, but there's a group of mostly kind of white people who are asking for more information about potential rape, right? Like 50, 60, 100 riot police turn up to that. We can all see that now, right? So that's where I think they're behind the times, like we've seen in Ireland. We can all see that you behave differently towards people who are maybe your own, actually, as opposed to people who are on the left or just foreign.
Well, I hope you don't get reported to prevent over this, because accusing, the government of two-tier policing is officially a sign of extremism. So Donald Trump is on a warpath, maybe a crusade even, against Pope Leo. There's been kind of ongoing rumblings of discontent with the Pope from the White House. The Pope, kind of understandably, is not a big fan of Trump's migration policies. He's not keen on locking up illegal migrants. He also has been very outspoken against the war. And it's led to this bizarre situation where Trump is hitting back, most notably and probably most famously through these sort of AI-generated pictures of himself as Jesus.
Or as a doctor.
Well, Trump claims as a doctor.
He mistook it for...
Did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross, as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that?
I think we could show it on screen, and you can decide whether you think it's a doctor or Jesus. But there's also been these other bizarre rows, like, the White House has been calling in, like, the diplomats from the Vatican to give them a dressing down. And I don't want to turn this podcast into the rest is history, but it's interesting that Elbridge Colby, one of the White House officials, started talking about the Avignon papacy, which is this obscure, period in time from several hundred years ago when the Pope didn't reside in Rome and resided in France instead, over some, religious schism. What kind of world are we living in? It's this madness.
No, kind of extended beef with the Pope was not on my 2026 bingo card, but there we go. Donald Trump is nothing if not unpredictable. Or is he? This is the thing about Trump. There's certain figures that he is quite deferent to, because he does appreciate status and leadership, and he kind of sees, whether it's the royals or indeed the Holy Father, as a kind of level of super celebrity to which he is quite attracted. Like there was that very funny picture of the late Pope and Trump and Melania Trump having a kind of grinning photo next to him whilst he looked pretty... Pope Francis looked pretty unimpressed. So there has been... But at the same time, as soon as they get on the wrong side of him, it's just all bets are off. And, it's not that, it's something that people could expect. Obviously, Trump has never claimed to be a Catholic. He does claim to be a Christian, but those claims have often collided with his own lack of interest, shall we say. I mean, it was back in 2015, I think, when he was running for the primary, got asked in an interview, what's your favourite book of the Bible? He said, all of them.
All of them. And
So
don't
he
ask that,
could-
it's personal.
Which is a fantastic retort. And it's also interesting because the fact that Trump increased his share of the vote amongst Catholics last time around. There's also a lot of quite high-profile kind of Catholic converts in his own administration. I believe Eldridge Colby is one, or certainly is Catholic, I think. J.D. Vance, of course, as well, who this week was actually kind of lecturing the Pope on theology, saying that he got it wrong. It wasn't based in truth, which is, some might say takes some brass neck from somebody who joined the church not that long ago. But nevertheless, it's an interesting schism. But on the point of popes or religious figures kind of weighing in times of war, it's also a bit tricky because what can sound like a kind of high-minded defense of just peace and all the rest of it can often just sound like siding with the aggressors, or at least the side that one wouldn't want to side with in this case. So it's a mess, but it's nothing if not entertaining, dare I say.
No, and there was a similar controversy over basically the previous pope calling for peace in the Russia-Ukraine war, and we know that peace means surrender in that context. I mean, I'm not a fan of religion in politics, but it feels a bit churlish to say the pontiff should stop pontificating. So it is kind of his job, to be fair. Patrick, what have you made of this? I know I'm interested in what you think, because I was on GB News the other day talking about this, and I know it's really divided the viewership. Half, like a lot of people saying, especially the AI photos, saying it's disrespectful, and many others saying the Pope should put a sock in it. This is
what camp are you in?
One thing I think is absolutely hilarious is that apparently Pope Leo's brother, Lou Prevost, is a massive Republican, right? So he's been a vocal MAGA movement supporter and has openly supported President Trump. So the Pope's brother is like, bomb Iran, lads, right? And the Pope is like, nah, war's bad. What I would have liked to have seen the Pope done was, whilst acknowledging that war is bad and, look, Trump might not necessarily be entirely in control of things, is also acknowledging that the Islamist Ayatollah of Iran who wants to actually kill everyone in the Vatican is bad. Right, that would have been quite nice. Like, I think he could have done both, because at the moment it's very much like, hey, we can all peacefully coexist. Not with the Ayatollah. I'm not saying they should have done what they've done, but it's like it would have been like him going, you should have put Bin Laden on trial, and it's like, well, World Trade Center, all that stuff. So I would have liked to see the Pope be a little bit more nuanced in the fact that he's like, does he actually believe that in his case, like, Catholicism is the religion? Because he's giving the Ayatollah a lot more credit than the Ayatollah would give him, but there you go. But I mean, it's interesting though as well. I was looking at Trump, as you mentioned there, got a lot of stick for his post about the Jesus doctor thing. Right? So I thought, okay, that was weird, and he's deleted it. But if you look at Rachel Reeves's X account, right? She posted yesterday boasting about how much money we're spending on Ukraine's defense, whilst currently asking our Ministry of Defense to cut £3.5 billion. David Lammy's Twitter feed, here we go. We're reforming our prison system. He's let one prisoner out by mistake every 48 hours since the April before. Keir Starmer, we're fixing the foundations. 5.2% unemployment, 16% youth unemployment, 1.5 million more on universal credit than when Labour came into power. And you think, was Trump's Jesus tweet actually like the most dishonest out of all of that?
There's probably no greater font of disinformation than Keir Starmer's Twitter account.
Yeah,
just because
it's like he's just not gone full Jesus, right?
Yeah,
but
and it's not that he lies.
Yeah,
he lives in a parallel universe where everything's going great and everyone loves the government. And
your bills are coming down. They're fucking not. They're not. There's a bit. I've got a bill here. It's gone up, mate.
Yeah. And we're all happily being fed by the breakfast clubs, at least, but that's it.
And I think it's that we're all living in these his largesse. I thought you were going to say for a second, Patrick, that Rachel Reeves had posted a meme of her as Jesus or something. I've missed this. This is being absolute.
Right.
She's definitely had her hair done, and she looks.
I don't know. I mean,
looking
she is being crucified in the polls.
Oh,
yeah, that's what reminds me.
That's why you don't pay me.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for watching the show. But that's not all. If you're a Spike supporter, you can join us now over on Spike Podcast Unlocked, where we'll be talking about Sadiq Khan, accusing his critics of spreading disinformation.
Sadiq Khan is living an absolute fantasy land, and I can only assume that the only person he talks to is Fraser Nelson.
And the Hungarian elections and the defeat of Viktor Orban. So see you there. Thank you so much for watching the Spike podcast. We'll be back next week, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed the Spike podcast, then why not check out what else our channel has to offer, from our documentaries to our weekly interviews and podcasts like The Brendan O'Neill Show. And if you're a Spike supporter, you can watch the second half of this episode by logging in on the Spike website. If you're not yet a Spike supporter, then why not sign up now? You'll get unlimited access to the website, ad-free reading, discounted tickets to our events, and so much more. So become a Spike supporter today by going to spiked-online.com/support. That's spiked-online.com/support.